It's a little after 9. We're going to get started. We're going to get right into the Compensation Committee. The agenda is relatively light. There are, I believe, 3 action items that, if we've all reviewed, are quite straightforward. There might be a question or two, and then there's 1 information item. So item number 1 on our agenda is the approval of the committee agenda and work plan. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Keeley?
Moved and seconded. Yes,
Excuse me.
roll. Mr. Weish, yeah, thank you.
Good morning. I'm calling the roll on the teachers. I like that. Mr. Unterman? Ms. Dillon? Ms. Hendricks? Ms. Vargas? For the Director of Finance, Ms. Ortega? Chairperson Keeley, you have a quorum.
Thanks, Mr. Weish. So approval of the agenda has been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item number 2 is the approval of the minutes from June 10th. I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second? There's a second
Second.
somewhere.
Wake
There
up,
it is.
people.
There it
Wake
is.
up. No coffee.
Okay, moved and properly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye. I'll abstain.
And an abstention. Thank you. Item 3 is the disclosure of incentives for statutory positions for the 2014-15 year. This is a consent item as well. Let me just pull this up for a second. This item deals with the compensation incentive program and the awards received for 2014-15. Are there any questions about this item? This is an annual item that comes before us for approval. Seeing none, this is on consent, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item number 4 is the compensation consultant solicitation process. Ms. Norcia, thank you.
Thank you. This is an action item before the committee, and it requests your approval to issue a request for proposal for compensation consultant services, and also approval for the scope of work outlining the proposed services the committee is seeking a compensation consultant to provide. The proposed RFP would seek to hire a primary compensation strategist and a pool of compensation consultants to provide services to the committee. The current contracts with Global Governance Advisors and McLaughlin Partners are set to expire June 30th of 2016, which is next year. The terms of both these contracts were initially established for the period July 1st, 2011 through June 30th of 2014. Both contracts have already been extended for an additional 2 years. The first time it was extended through June 30th of 2015, and the second time through June 30th of next year, 2016. There are no more options to extend these contracts further. The scope of work included as an attachment to this item was developed referencing the Compensation Committee Charter, which outlines the responsibilities of the committee in carrying out their duty and includes those services the committee may desire from a consultant. Upon your approval to move forward with issuing an RFP and the scope of work, staff will finalize the solicitation of the RFP. A list has been compiled of compensation consultants, proposed compensation consultants, to invite to review the RFP. This list includes consultants who have either provided support to CalSTRS in the past or to other public pension funds. Next steps will include staff conducting preliminary interviews by the end of February 2016, and then the committee will be presented and interview the final candidates at its April meeting. At this time, I'm available to hear any questions the committee may have.
Thanks, Ms. Norcia. Any questions, comments on either the scope or the process? Okay, seeing none, this is an action item. I entertain a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Hendricks, seconded by Ms. Vargas. Questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes. Item 5 is a salary range recommendation for the General Counsel, Mr. Bartow. Ms. Norcia?
Yes. This next item is a proposal for the committee's consideration to increase the maximum of the salary range for the General Counsel classification. The current salary range for the General Counsel position is $170,000 up to the maximum of $240,000. This salary range has been in place since January of 2008. The last labor market analysis, which was conducted in November of 2013, concluded the salary range for the general counsel position was at market, and the committee took no action at that time to adjust the salary range. The current general counsel incumbent is the only person who is at the maximum of the salary range for those positions that are covered under the compensation authority of the board. Until another labor market analysis is conducted on positions that fall under the board's authority, the salary range for the general counsel position will remain the same. As a reminder, the general counsel position is not eligible for an incentive opportunity, nor general salary increases, which are afforded to other state employees. This is an action item. Staff recommends the committee approve a 5% increase to the maximum of the general counsel salary range, which would be effective July 1st of 2015. The 5% increase would result in the max of the salary range of the general counsel position being set at $252,000. This concludes my introduction, and I'm available if there are any questions the committee may have.
Any questions on the staff recommendation? Comments? Ms. Hendricks.
I just wanted to understand in the discussion section on Comp 14 where it says, until the committee directs a comprehensive compensation survey to be conducted on executive management. I mean, is that, I guess I'm just trying to understand, is that something that we should be looking at moving forward in terms of this issue?
We are doing that. We
are
discussed
doing that. Okay.
doing that on a periodic basis, but we didn't have any pressures on the comp plan at all because no one was at the max
Right.
with this one position. So we were just doing it on a normal cycle. So we were planning on going ahead when you get your new consultant established and everything to do a
We'll
big
pursue that.
survey.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
in the plan to pursue this
Yeah.
analysis, but for now, this one position, since it's hit up against the max, the recommendation is to give it
Yeah, we were
5%.
asking you to treat this as an exceptional basis, given it's only one of all the positions.
I'd move approval.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded. Okay, any questions or comments? Just a comment, I think the incumbent has served this board well. He's provided us stability and certainty, and I think for those of us that have been on the board, we've seen changes in that position early on. I think in my tenure, I think Ms. Dillon's tenure, a couple of us were on the board where we saw some instability in that position. And to the extent that that's an important feature, I think for us it is. He's provided great stability, and so I'm happy to see this go forward as the recommendation.
Again, we're just changing the range, and then the actual movement is determined by management. Yeah.
So the staff recommendation has been moved by Ms. Hendricks and seconded by Ms. Dillon. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 6 is the evaluation of the incentive criteria for engagement and compliance positions. Ms. Norcia?
This item presents incentive criteria recommendations for the positions of portfolio manager in investment office engagement and the associate portfolio manager in investment compliance. The investment office engagement position role was formally established this year as a portfolio manager classification. In order to determine the appropriate incentive criteria for this position, staff reached out to PCA for a recommendation. PCA's recommendation is attached to this item as attachment 1 for your reference. PCA recommends the incentive criteria be set at 30% toward the total fund and 70% toward qualitative factors. The qualitative factors include 50% toward engagement factors and 20% toward personal performance. The engagement factors will reflect objectives related to the investment office engagement strategy and approach. And outreach. Those factors are listed in this item for your reference as well. PCA's recommendation reflects the incentive compensation criteria for this position, largely reflecting the position's responsibilities of investment office engagement issues and solutions. Therefore, the compensation evaluation emphasizes outcomes and metrics in this area versus overemphasizing the investment performance of the CalSTRS portfolio. The next position whose incentive criteria is being evaluated is the Associate Portfolio Manager Investment Compliance. The compliance risk, ethics, and reporting responsibilities, which are performed by investment staff at the investment officer levels, used to be managed by the Director of Investment Operations. With the establishment of the Chief Operating Investment Officer, those responsibilities have moved from the Operations Unit to form an Investment Compliance Unit, reporting directly to the COIO. The Associate Portfolio Manager will lead this unit and provide oversight to staff, who will continue to be responsible for compliance reporting and investment performance. Prior to forming the Investment Compliance Unit, investment officers performing these responsibilities were evaluated using the Director of Investment Operations incentive criteria. Therefore, staff recommends the continued use of this incentive criteria for the investment staff in the Investment Compliance Unit. This investment criteria is set at 50% toward total fund, 30% toward project management, customer service, and 20% toward personal performance. Attachment 2 reflects the 2 proposed incentive criteria for these positions. This is an action item for the committee, and staff recommends the committee adopt the proposed incentive criteria as provided in Attachment 2.
Any questions for Ms. Narcia? Ms. Dalman, did you want to add anything? See if there's questions. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve the staff recommendation, which is also a PCA staff recommendation. Is that correct? Thank you.
Correct.
Okay. So moved by Ms. Hendricks, seconded by Ms. Vargas. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Dalman. Item number
There you go,
7
Chris.
is the evaluation of delegation of authority. This is an information item which I believe is also scheduled to come back to us in April as action. I would ask that we not take action on this today, even though it's not, because there are probably some conversations I'd like to have with staff about this, maybe between now and April. So, Ms. Narcia, would you introduce the item, please?
Sure. Earlier this year, at its February meeting, the committee requested staff to add to its 2015-16 work plan an item which introduces additional delegation consideration for the Chief Executive Officer for non-CEO, CIO investment matters, which are presently under the authority of the Compensation Committee and Board. This is an information item and is meant to engage the committee in a discussion to consider those areas the committee and the board has authority for and wishes to delegate to the Chief Executive Officer. Presently, the Compensation Committee has authority for the following: to provide oversight to CalSTR's compensation strategy and operation of the plan, to engage professional services, consultants, and counsel to assist the committee in fulfilling its responsibility, and lastly, to develop recommendations for the board related to CalSTR's compensation plan and policies necessary to effectively administer the compensation plan. The board has final approval on recommendations put forth by the committee. The CEO presently has delegation to administer certain components of the compensation plan. Included in this item is a more detailed listing of areas the board and compensation authority has authority, the board and compensation committee has authority for, and those the CEO has a delegation for. Again, this is an information item only. Any determinations made to updating the compensation policy and administrative procedures will be brought back before the committee in April. At this time, I'd like to open up the discussion for the committee's input on any changes they may want to consider.
Questions or comments?
I sort of had
Yeah.
sure. When are we looking at our comp consultants?
In April.
April? Okay.
Yeah, between now and April, the process will begin, and before us in April, we'll vote on the compensation consultant.
Okay.
But we also have the pool of consultants that are always available
Right,
to us.
like
So we'll be looking at
login.
a primary consultant and then the secondary consultants as well.
Okay. Great. That's all I wanted.
Does staff see anything in particular in the current process or range of responsibilities that the board has around compensation relative to what the delegated responsibilities of the CEO are? Is anything not working well, or something that we could be doing better, differently, or is more aligned with general practices of other institutions like ours?
I think the board, definitely with some of the experiences relative to the incentive criteria where we needed to come back to the comp committee to get approval. For example, the one item 6 that we just approved, those are those are definitely pieces that if the CEO had delegation for, could have been approved at his level without being brought back. I did have an opportunity last month at a conference to talk to some of the other chiefs of HR for other public pension funds, and there are a few, Missouri and Michigan, where the CEO is granted full delegation for the compensation policy and the administrative procedures of that. With the caveat, the committee and board still had visibility through the budget process of any changes the CEO would make relative to the policy.
I think the example you just gave, item 6, is a good one because I had a preliminary conversation about that item, and my first question was, why is that coming to us? Why are you bringing this to my attention?
Yeah.
Why do I need to know? And because it's the way the structure is set up at this point. In the years that I've served as chair as well, I've gotten courtesy calls, which were much appreciated, highly professional. Just as a heads up, this is a decision that I'll be making that I think technically by policy I needed to be made aware of the decision that was made, which is, that's appropriate. But sometimes I think my comfort level would be like, I trust the decision you're making. Mm-hmm. Right? You're the incumbent and the person in that seat sees the day-to-day operation. So I think it's a good conversation for us to have. I think the details will matter. Details matter a lot with this issue, but I think it's a conversation that we need to flesh out over the next couple of months, and I'll speak with you and others offline so that when it comes back in April, perhaps we can have a little better understanding of what the options would be.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Lichtner.
Thank you, Chair Keeley. The conversation came up, if you remember, when we were establishing the salary ranges for the associate portfolio manager classifications. And even though those positions are under the board authority, they are 5 levels down within the organization from the CIO, or 6 levels down. So I think that the conversation was, we're really getting down into some, weedy, salary determinations when we're really evaluating based on the peer groups that we have established. We're benchmarking based on what the policy that you guys have set on benchmarking salaries. So that's why how the conversation came up. It seemed like the board felt as though there were too much analysis into some of these lower level positions that really don't need to be brought to the attention of the board. Another example is we have a pay differential for the CFA certification, those types of activities when somebody gets additional educational certifications, that's under the authority of the board. Now, we administer that, but those types of activities are things that really should or could be considered for administration of the system's compensation plan.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Any other comments from staff? Questions from the committee?
I just had one, from my seat, that came out of your conversation. I didn't raise this item with you, but I would say from my seat, what's the most important is consistency and application and culture around the plan as we apply it to the staff. So I think it works pretty well that you're setting the big boundaries around comparator groups and where you want to be compared to the market and those things. But we want to make sure then when we get into that subset of administrative decisions that we have the same perspective as you look at those incentive decisions. Otherwise, we would end up with staff being treated differently, I think, a little bit in the process. I think that's so. And over time, as you know, I think we've really matured a lot on this whole topic. It was very bumpy way back.
Good way of putting it. We've matured a lot, yeah.
In many ways. But it was hard, tough going those first years we had this comp plan, very tough going. And I think we've developed a good rhythm to it. So I wouldn't say there's anything glaringly wrong at all, frankly. But it could be tighter for sure.
Yeah, I like that, and I think that's a good way of putting it. I think my hope is that the board can deal with the bigger, or what's our policy, what's our philosophy around compensation, what are our core principles, and then the implementation of consistency within the system, but keeping us away from those decisions that really don't necessarily have to come before us, that can be appropriately delegated to the appropriate person. So. I think in April we'll have maybe some options and some clearer decision points. And in the interim, it gives us a little time to chat offline, and maybe the board will, committee members can weigh in as well as they start thinking about this, if there's aspects of it that they want to see change. Okay. Okay, seeing no other questions. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Dillon.
That's okay, I just weighed in.
You're very patient.
Oh, no. I would like Amy's opinion, not necessarily opinion, but she has some expertise with other systems and taking a look at what other
Very good.
systems too. I think during the interim, having that also be part of our discussion or our research as we move forward.
For the record,
Working
this
it
is
out.
Amy
Yeah.
McDuffie. She serves as the board's governance committee consultant. Good morning.
Oh, good morning. I would echo Jack's comment about having consistency in your process. And certainly as you look at your authority in general, having it be around the big items, policy level items, what are your comparator groups? Those are the things where it's very important for you to set the stage for what your desires are, in particular as it relates to incentive pay. But within that, you have a staff that can read through the administrative procedures that have been set up and have been previewed to the board. And so having trust that they're going to do that, and then compliance against that process would also be important.
I could go
Sure.
back.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ms. Dillon.
So Amy, do you have visibility of the levels of delegation other systems have? So if we're looking at delegating more, so like Melissa talked about Missouri and Michigan, correct? And what level of delegation they have and authorities under that. Would you have visibility from some of the other systems that you work with?
Yeah, so when you look generally among large public retirement systems here in the U.S., it's not common yet to have incentive pay as part of the compensation structure overall.
Okay, thank you. That's what I
Sure.
was kind of going for.
Mr. Boykin?
Thanks.
Yeah, I just, because my principal is within the state of California and we're always concerned about comparisons with state employees, certainly the big picture items, the comparator group that we choose, but also I think the salary ranges is something that certainly, I think this board would take input from the staff about where the salary ranges need to be to make everything make sense in terms of compensation. But I think, speaking for my principal, we would like to still be able to ultimately approve the salary ranges. But I think it does make sense to look at delegating a lot to staff in terms of performance and adjustments within those ranges that the board sets.
Mr. Boykin? Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Item 8 is a review of information requests. I didn't hear any, did I, Mr. Wee?
None.
Thank you. Item 9 is the draft agenda for April. It's very straightforward. Any questions or comments about that? And of course, if there's an issue that arises between now and April, we certainly can add it to the agenda. Mr. Aylman, I see you approaching. Are you with us right now?
Pardon me?
What are you? Where are
I'm on the
right
draft
there.
agenda.
Oh, you're speaking to
Number
the draft
9.
agenda. Go ahead. Okay.
I would like to ask you to add 2 action items to that. The first, Michael and McGee yesterday recommended that you amend the incentive policy for real estate to match the way the policy, it kind of brings up a bigger issue, is that we got to find an easier mechanism for you that every time the investment committee changes a benchmark, kind of should be automatic in the incentive plan rather than having this committee, thankfully, is meeting, but now we have to wait to April to do it. So, but you would add that for an action plan. And then I raised this at the offsite, the graded in of the incentives for new employees. CalPERS did not adopt that, and that was a discussion that you had that we could bring back to you if they did or did not. Will present, it has become a recruitment problem, and then just so you understand, the unintended consequence of having that
causes us to get people over here from other funds, we have to pay them a higher base salary to make up for it, which is obviously in perpetuity, or at least, I mean, as long as they work here. So I think it ended up having unintended consequences that are actually working against us. So we would like to bring that back for your consideration to look at it would be the graded in
Yeah.
policy on incentives.
So the two items are the incentive policy for the real estate, based upon Ms. McGee's recommendation yesterday, and the graded in policy, rate incentive pay for new employees in the investment division.
Correct.
So I don't have any, I'm not opposed to the committee. I think it's appropriate for the committee to look at those items, and I think we should have them as discussion items, add them to the discussion aspect of, or information item for us to discuss. We wouldn't be prepared, Chris, to take action on those.
That's your consideration. My
So we'll put it
concern
on
with
the-
real estate is if you don't take action before June 30,
Right.
then it wouldn't be for a whole
Yeah.
year. So you'd have a complete year mismatch between the benchmarks. I think we feel the graded in is important, but it's up to you. You know, if it's information, you could always take action if you're ready. So whatever you want to do. We need to put that
Yeah,
on the
we'll
table.
put them on the agenda. They're on the agenda for April. Ms. Slicknock?
What I asked staff to also do relative to the graded in is to start looking at the statistics on how it is impacting our recruitment. If somebody is deterred from coming into the system because of the graded in, what recruitment bonus are we having to potentially pay? Are we having to pay higher, incoming salary? So we are going to have some factual, quantitative information for you to consider if you want to consider changing it, not.
That would be
Yeah.
helpful. We don't have to relive the issue now. It's not on our agenda, so we can't really discuss it. I do think there is also some issues of relocation, compensation. People are if they're relocating this, and so we can't discuss it, so we won't. But we'll put it on the agenda item for discussion in April. Thanks, Mr. Aylman, for bringing this to our attention. Mr. Boykin?
Chris, one thing, are you comfortable waiting till April, or would you prefer that the compensation committee take it up,
We can do it in
do
February.
a February, a short meeting in February?
I guess my staff is saying sooner is always better. You don't have a February meeting. You only have the April meeting.
But we could.
We could look
there's
at
no
that.
reason
Why don't we
couldn't
talk
have a
with
short-
Jack and you and see, I don't know what your February schedule looks like, if we could meet it.
Here-
Sooner is better. There are vacancies where we have already gone through 3 people having this as a problem in the recruitment.
So here's a suggestion. This is a term I heard a lot. We'll make every effort to have these two items be addressed in February. And if for some reason we're not able to because of scheduling or other issues that staff is not able to prepare the materials in a manner which we think is adequate, we'll push it back to April. But if scheduling permits, we'll just have these two items addressed in a short meeting in February.
And just a reminder that when we do make changes to the policy, they wouldn't be effective until the following July. So having it approved in February isn't going to have it instituted any sooner necessarily.
I don't think we should be approving these in February. If we're going to be looking at, I don't think we should be approving them. If we do look at these in February, we should be looking at them as information that creates some discussion and kind of tease it up for an April, maybe action in April.
Okay, we'll
Yeah.
figure that out.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So that's the agenda for our next meeting, which may be in February. Maybe, if we can do it.
You want that at 8 o'clock?
Don't go there, Jack.
Jack, you know, I
haven't
start
had my
firing
co-
those
I haven't
emails at
finished my
4
coffee
a.m.
yet.
I start firing them at 4.
Yeah, just don't date it.
That's right. Let me know.
Very good.
I might make it on time.
Item 10, opportunities for members of the public. Seeing none, we're adjourned.